In Chapter 2, we're going to take a look at some advanced functions and formulas. And many of these functions that we look at through Chapter 2, you'll be familiar with in some ways. And you can see immediately on page 35 some of the all capped functions there. The count function, the average function, sum function. We've looked at all those functions before, but we're going to look at some additional functions that are a little bit more advanced and have a little bit different twist on them. So we're going to take a look at the objectives, as I mentioned, that are on page 35. As you'll notice, we will create and use named ranges in formulas, which we've named ranges before, but we'll do it again in this chapter, and then use them in these more advanced functions. We'll also use the function count_a, count_if, and count_ifs. We'll also look at average if and average ifs, sum if and sum ifs. Okay, and then we'll edit a named range. We'll also rename and delete a named range. And then shifting gears a little bit, we're going to look at data using the lookup functions VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, which is the VLOOKUP stands for vertical, H is for horizontal. We'll also analyze loan payments using the PMT function. We've looked at the payment function, the PMT function previously, but in this chapter we'll look at the PMT function. Also, we'll use conditional logic functions such as if, and, or. And a couple of those I'll probably skip in the chapter. I'll let you read through those. And then also the last objective, modify text using text functions proper, upper, lower, and substitute. And again, I'll probably skip a couple of those towards the end of the chapter. So at the bottom of page 35, they kind of go over again what built-in functions are and what the makeup of each function are. They're all consistent depending on their name, and then they have an argument in parentheses. So they describe that a little bit at the bottom of page 35, so if you want to review that, feel free to do so. And then on pages 36 and 37, you'll see the model answers that we'll be working towards in each of the projects. On page 37 in Project 1, we are going to start out with using named ranges. We're going to create some named ranges, and then we'll use some of those statistical functions, the count, excuse me, average, sum ifs, all those particular functions we'll take a look in Project 1. Down at the bottom of page 37, they talk about naming ranges, and just kind of as a review there, remember that assigning a name to a cell or a range of cells allows you to reference the source by a descriptive label rather than having a cell address or a range address as well. But that hopefully then makes the formula a little bit easier to understand. So if you're going to be sharing information, sharing your worksheet with other individuals, it may be a good idea, as mentioned previously, to name some ranges. And then obviously you can use those named ranges in formulas and functions. And then also just another notation there at the bottom of page 37, the very last paragraph, it says by default the range to which a range name applies is referenced using absolute references, which again can save you some time rather than putting in $signs in front of cell references. If you've named that range, you wouldn't have to use $signs. They're treated as absolute references. At the top of page 38, they give you some examples of typical range names, cell names, and then if you see those same cells being named, then the formula or the function makes a little bit more sense. So, and then they review again there at the top of page 38, and bulleted list kind of gives you some guidelines for naming ranges, so you want to certainly review those as well. In Project 1A, they asked to bring up the workbook called All Claims October 12th Vehicle Report, and to rename that as Level 2, Chapter 2, Project 1, which I've already done. All of that, I have the workbook already up on the screen. So first thing we're going to do is name several ranges in this workbook, and then we'll use those named ranges in those advanced functions. So the first named range that we're going to look at is the auto driver. And again, to name a range, we want to select the cells in the range that we want to name. And then I'm just going to use the name box on the formula bar there. I'm going to click right inside, and the name that we want to give it is auto number. If you'll recall, we can't have any spaces in our named ranges, so I'm going to squish all that together and I'm going to press enter. That names that range. They also want driver number. that range to be named driver number. Rating, so again I'm selecting the cells, clicking inside the name box, typing in the name and pressing enter. Claim estimate, we're going to abbreviate that a little bit, EST, and then the final one is repair shop, and they'll abbreviate that rep shop. Okay, so now once they're all named, it's probably a good idea to go back and just kind of look in the name box and make sure that those ranges are indeed going to the correct range. So you can go to each one separately and hopefully they do select and highlight the named ranges. In the middle of page 39 they begin discussion of the statistical functions, so you want to make sure that you read through that. The new one that we'll see in this chapter is count A, and if you recall, the count function previously when we learned it typically counted all of the cells within a range. Well, with the count A returns the number of cells that aren't empty, and essentially what that means is that it'll count the number of cells that have text in it, or text and numbers. And if you look at the example at the bottom of page 39, notice the formula that they're using there. On the right hand side it has count A2 through A6. If you'll notice in that range of cells it's text, and if you use the count function you wouldn't get anything. It would return you a 0 because there are those cells have text in them rather than just numbers. However, if you'll notice the function at the bottom, the count A, if you type in your count A with that same range, it will count those cells and should return 5. So, and you can see that in E9 as they've displayed that and showed the difference between those two. Very helpful function to use if you're wanting to count cells that have text in them. And then the count if function, they describe that at the bottom of page 39. It'll count a number of cells if a certain condition is met, and then the count ifs function, more than one condition has to be met in order to count the cells. So we're going to take a look at that, the count if function, in our worksheet here. You can kind of see we're going to build this summary area of our worksheet, and we're going to start with the number of claims area, which is in L4, and our goal here is to count the number of claims for each of these repair shops. So there's a variety of ways that you can do that, but what they're going to have us to do essentially is take a look at the repair shop field and then count those if it meets a certain criteria. So we are going to be using the count if function. Alright, and we're going to begin by going into the function wizard, or the insert function dialog box, and as mentioned previously, you can get there a variety of ways. Go to the formulas tab, insert function. You can also go to the function library and choose statistical. Let's see, probably the statistical you would have to go in through the more functions, which is fine. And then what I always do is go through the FX. That's the quickest way, at least for me. So the count if function is, like I mentioned before, if you don't know what category it's in, select all to show them all. They'll be in alphabetical order. But the count if function is the statistical category, so we're already there. And if you click down in your list and type a C, that'll take you down to the C's, and then we want count if. Okay, so the range that we're wanting to count is the repair shop, and if you select this area, if I click and drag and select down, since we've named it, it'll automatically put repair or rep shop in the range text box. If we wanted to type that in, that would be perfectly fine. So we're going to count this range if the criteria is A+, paint, and body. Now in real life you need to kind of know where the spaces are in this, and we're just going to try it. I've put a space after the plus and we'll see if it catches. In fact, I can see that it will. There's 3 there. So again, we're counting this range, the range that we've selected there, if the criteria is A+, paint, and body. Okay, and we know it's okay because we've got the numbers showing right there. So I'll click OK. There are 3 of those. So it counted those ranges of cells if the criteria was met, which is A plus paint and body. Okay, now we could autofill down and go to each one of these separately and just change JFJ Auto for that one, Logan's Auto Body for that one, and that would be fine. I just want to go through the COUNTIF function one more time, make sure that we have that correct. I'm going to go back to the function wizard. Again, COUNTIF is in the statistical area. I'm going to double click on COUNTIF. The range again is rep shop, so I can either type it in or I could select it like I did previously. The criteria this time is JFJ Auto. And notice here, I didn't type in the quotes, but when I click outside that text box, it automatically puts the quotes around it. It knows that since that's text to put quotes around it. I'll click OK. And there are 9 JFJ Autos in that particular range. So from here on out, I'm going to autofill down and then just modify. Rather than JFJ Autos, we want Logan's Auto Body. And the last one is West Collision. Okay, so you can see there's 5 for Logan's Body and then 4 for West Collision. Now we'll come back to this next column, which is the total estimates. We'll use the SUMIF function on that one, but let's go on down to the little area here. We're looking for JFJ claims that exceed 5,000. So if you'll notice here, there are 2 criteria that have to be met, and we're counting the number of claims, okay, number of JFJ claims that exceed 5,000, and the 5,000 is referring to the claim estimate, okay, rather than the deductible. I know there's 2 columns there that have numbers in it, but we're looking at claim estimates. So 2 conditions have to be met. We want to count them if JFJ Autos is in that range and the claim is greater than 5,000. So we've got 2 criteria here. Okay, so that's where the count ifs come into play. Again, I'm going to go back to the function dialog box. And we'll go down to count. This time we're going to choose count ifs because we have more than 1 criteria that needs to be met. Okay, so for the first range, we're again looking for JFJ Auto. So that range is the rep shop. But again, I'm just going to click and drag and select, and it'll automatically put in rep shop. The criteria for that needs to be JFJ Auto. Okay, so that's 1 criteria. The second one is the claim estimate. And again, I'm going to go to, if I can get this out of here, the claim estimate. I'm going to select that range, A4 through H24, and again it brings up the name, claim estimate. And again, I could have typed that in and that would have been just fine. The criteria for that needs to be greater than 5,000. Okay, that's our goal. And then you can see, again, JFJ claims, if you can see all this, that's our first criteria for the repair shop, and then the claim estimates have to be greater than 5,000. Alright, that's our only 2 criteria. But it allows for multiple criteria, the count ifs. Alright, I'm going to click OK. And there should be 5. Okay. Alright, and then the next one down, if you'll notice, still JFJ claims for ratings that are greater than 3. So again, it's a count if because 2 criteria have to be met in order to count them. So we'll go back to the insert function dialog box, count ifs. The range for the first one is still the rep shop, and that has to be JFJ Auto. The second criteria, remember, were the ratings, and they were greater than 3. And the range name for that, again, we can go over and type it in, or select it, I'm sorry, or you can type in the name, which we called rating. But I'll select it. When you select that range, it automatically puts the name in there. And then the criteria for that needs to be, let's go back over here, needs to be greater than 3. So I'll type in the greater than 3, and then we'll click OK, and that should be 5. So there's 5 JFJ autos with ratings greater than 3.